careful, Lara. I fear there are things in the vaults man was not meant to see.
I'm not a man, Jean. And I'm always very, very careful.
Hi everyone, welcome back to SwitchUp. These are performance reviews of the 3 games. I had early access to the PC version, so was able to play through on that, but now we have Switch codes. I can give you the Switch specific information to give you a clearer idea of how they run, any changes, and any bugs and issues, so that you can decide whether it's a good place to buy them. Once again, Lara Croft has had a bit of a makeover. We've got 99's The Last Revelation, 2000's Chronicles, and the perhaps more infamous The Angel of Darkness from 2003, with the guidance of Saber and their Nintendo Switch wizardry working on the remasters alongside Aspyr. Say what you will about the games themselves, I'm actually really pleased to see more developers working to preserve some of what I guess now can be considered classic games, even if they're not necessarily the best. And there are some great things here, but also some really silly ones, as well as a few extra goodies. But does the remaster unearth buried treasure, or are these relics best left in the past? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp, now let's find out. Okay, let's get into the nitty gritty. The Switch version does feature HD Rumble. You can enable or disable this from the options menu, although perhaps calling it HD is a little bit kind. Once again, we've got the option to switch between the classic tank controls and the modern adaptation of Lara's movement, which has her moving with the directional left stick, meaning that you can just point where you want her to go. Whereas the tanks, you use kind of left and right to rotate her on the spot before ambling in the given direction and hoping you go where you want. It always felt clunky in the day, but it was actually intrinsic to the design of the Tomb Raider games. You'll notice that because once again, a lot of the tutorials, if you're using modern controls, just simply won't be applicable. For example, you used to go to the edge of a ledge, do a little quick hop backwards, and that would give you the perfect distance for performing one of the longer jumps. Try doing that with the modern controls and you're going to spin round on the spot and run in the other direction. But once you get your head round, the controls actually are okay. The modern adaptation works for the most part and you will quickly adapt to it. There are a couple of things you'll have to get quite quickly, like making sure to hold a trigger as you go off an edge so that you grab it and don't just fall to your untimely demise. Yes, you can do the classic handstand move. Someone was trolling me in the last review because I didn't show it, and you click the left stick in to sprint. Combat controls have also slightly changed so that they're more context based. So if there's an enemy and you auto lock onto them, when you've got your pistols drawn, that's the situation where you'll be able to perform those sideways rolls. I do think Saber and Aspyr should have gone for a manual lock-on system, or at least given you the option for that. The Last Revelation and Chronicles with the modern controls certainly feel better than their previous iterations, but the one that I was most interested in was The Angel of Darkness, which upon its release received a lot of criticism about the controls. Now, firstly, yes, it is better with the modern controls. 2, it's not great with the modern controls. There are just instances of weirdness. So I was trying to climb up a drain pipe right at the start, and the button I used to do that seemed just hit and miss. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. It also randomly decided to backflip me off the wall on occasion. And look, these are all things that you'll gradually get to grips with. It's just still very clunky. Don't get me wrong, if you go back to those original controls, your Switch will likely be launched out a window, so it is a big improvement. The actual game itself isn't as bad as people say. I think it was just those terrible controls. Now, alongside the 3 games, we also have the restoration of the Times content. If you're here in the UK, you'll know that the Times is a newspaper, and they actually had some bonus stages that were a part of that, which I've got to be honest, I didn't know about, but those have been fully restored and also remastered. So yeah, you got a few extra stages to play with. Other things that people may care about, all 3 versions feature cheat codes that can be accessed. The way you do that is slightly different for the Nintendo Switch. You'll still have to face north. It's basically the bumper buttons and triggers held together and sometimes up. If I remember, I'll pop a link to the guide for doing it. But yeah, those are there. You've got things like unlocking all the weapons, infinite lives, skipping stages. So then we can look at the visuals. Now, I have to say hats off to Saber. There's an incredible amount of work here, but it isn't all good. There's something about this release that really annoys me. Let's start with the positives. You can switch between the old and the new whenever you want. You can do that by pressing the plus button on Switch, and there's so much improved from the character model, which looks entirely different. The textures have been completely reworked. The lighting engine, again, completely new. The performance, it runs at 60 frames per second without a drop on Nintendo Switch from what I've seen so far, and they do include the original frame rate of 30 if you'd rather play at that, but you can play the old graphics with 60, which is actually the way that I played most of my gameplay, and again, that's related to the issue that I had. To give you an idea of the amount of changes that are made here, it feels more akin to a remake at times rather than a remaster. Entire sections have been remodeled, and you will find that as you progress through the stages, some of them aren't as intricately detailed and modeled as some of the others, and certainly the 6th game, The Angel of Darkness, doesn't look nearly as improved, which is probably more related to the difference between the original and what we have now. Now here's a weird thing, I do really like what they've done. I think it's great that they've improved things like the lighting. There are some accessibility options as well, so that items can actually be highlighted, because before they'd be completely invisible if you're in a dark area. But I don't know if I actually prefer the new graphics. That's just a preference. I think PlayStation 1, it had this special something about it. I love that these remasters still preserve the original, so there's no arguing. If you like the original look, you can go straight to it. Even with those weird animations, do you remember they almost used to vibrate as the character mannequins moved? That's all fully preserved. My biggest issue, and I think it's massive honestly, it's not something that wasn't in the 1 to 3 trilogy as well, is how dark the games are. In fact, depending on what screen you've got, it's either going to look like this, which is what most of my playtime has looked like, or like this. As you can see when you're playing in handheld, it's much easier to see what's going on. I had numerous instances on my screen where I couldn't see anything at all, so headed quickly to the game options only to find that there is no gamma slider, no brightness slider. For the amount of effort that's been put into the games, it is nonsensical for there not to be that. I get that this isn't going to affect everyone, but I'm definitely not alone in it, and it took me about 5 seconds of play to say, hang on, why is there no brightness slider? So hopefully Aspyr will bring that in a patch. Another visual quirk that I think could have been improved are some of the camera angles. At certain times, depending on which game you're in, the camera will lock into place, and whereas on the tank controls this wouldn't be an issue because you'd just be holding forwards to go forwards, on the modern controls, as the camera shifts, it feels really unintuitive because you'll suddenly veer off in a strange direction, and you'll probably see from the footage there are lots of times where I'm just running in sporadic ways. When it comes to handheld performance, is exactly the same as docked. It does look nice in this mode, I have to say, and it's been a preferred way to play just because I can actually see what I'm doing. What I'll find myself doing at the moment if I'm playing on my screen is to switch back to the old visuals just because some areas were brighter. You'll probably see throughout the entire footage I'm constantly switching backwards and forwards. It's not always just because I'm looking at things, it's very often because I can't see what I'm doing. These remasters also feature some improvements to the audio, but there are also a couple of quirks here as well, as we'll go into. If you turn off the music, all of the characters in the game lose their voice. The thing is, this is the way that it used to work back in the PlayStation era. Someone pointed out in the comments that dialogue was implemented exactly that way, but you would think again they would fix that for these remasters. A much bigger issue though, and maybe less noticeable depending on if you play with headphones or not, are some volume inconsistencies. So certain sound effects might be too loud or quiet, and on PC this hasn't been a problem for me because I could just mod it out, but on Switch obviously they're going to have to do some patchwork. As I say, something you may or may not notice. Now it may sound like I'm trying to nitpick, I'm really not, I'm just trying to give you all the information that I'm aware of. The visual improvements are certainly impressive, and there's a quite detailed photo mode that you can access by clicking both sticks in to pose Lara in a variety of ways and expressions and take the perfect thumbnail screenshot. You probably saw one. These are good things, they're nice for the fans, and you can switch once again between the old and the new graphics within that. There is some evidence that perhaps some sections and aspects of the games were a little rushed. Within the code on the PC, they've found things that just aren't present here. So maybe down the line in patches we'll also see extra additions, but I must have that brightness slider. I did also get one very early bug that required a complete level restart to fix, which is a bit of a pain. The games themselves, well, they're okay. I'm an old fart, so for me it was always Tomb Raider 2. Aside from the Angel of Darkness, it's pretty much more of the same. Sometimes you'll have a different character that you get to control, but you'll be crawling around under low things, pushing blocks, getting completely lost, and whether it's Paris or Egypt, it's basically a reskinned tomb. so the games do feel very similar regardless of setting. Again, with the caveat of the Angel of Darkness feeling a little different in some of its mechanics. The camera angle clunkiness, some less clear level design, they're not as good in my opinion as the first three. I do believe that the asking price of £26.99 is actually pretty reasonable. There was also a 10% discount before launch, but for 3 games that have been massively remastered, new controls, restored content, yes, they have a few issues and a few bugs that need ironing out, but for £9 each, that's not too bad, is it? They are also selling a pack that includes 1 to 6, so you can get all 6 games. I think it's £51.29 on the eShop. That's certainly something I'd like to own physically, so hopefully we get that at some point. But if we do, it better come with the patch for Gamma. For fans of the original games, Tomb Raider 4 to 6 is going to be a bit of a joy. While not perfect, Saber have done a lot of good work here. I think they've even managed to show that AOD wasn't actually that bad a game. Don't shoot. The trilogy gets a SwitchUp score of 78%. Thanks to all of you that enjoy the content. I hope this performance-centric review has been of use. Did you pick these up? Let me know in the comments, or are you going to wait for a sale that's invariably going to come? Thank you to our Patreons, our members, all of you that enjoy the content and don't like silly thumbnail faces. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!